It's the same in every language. One, you have to find out where your audience is, right? What is the type of person? Who is the avatar? What does that avatar look like for the person that you are trying to get in front of? Where do they shop? How do they spend their time? Where do they spend their time? What things are important to them? Because ultimately, marketing is just learning to be where your people are and learning to speak their language. So you have to figure that out. Just determine that avatar. And this is just not the sexy side of photography at all. I know everybody here wishes I just said, well, it's to take pretty pictures and get them out there.
Well, hey everyone. Welcome to episode 408 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen with your host, Matt Payne. This week, I had a fabulous chat with the multi-talented photographer and Canon Explorer of Light, Vanessa Joy. Vanessa is someone you'll want to pay attention to if you have any desire to grow your photography business or improve your pursuit of this craft. This episode is packed with actionable information that will surely elevate your photography brand if you take note. Fortunately, all of the nitty-gritty details are in the show notes if you want to come back and remember what we discussed. Before we launch into the chat, I have two new Patreon supporters that I want to thank for supporting the podcast. These two awesome folks stepped up to financially support this podcast by going to patreon.com/fstop and listen. I have nothing but admiration for the people who take the time to go and do that. Thank you all. Thank you to Joel Kahn and Andrew Russell for your generous support. By joining our Patreon family, you gain access to over 250 bonus episodes and have more direct access to me, the host of the show. Don't be shy. Okay, let's get to my conversation with Vanessa Joy. All right. Vanessa Joy, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Always good to meet someone virtually that I've been admiring their photography work.
Oh, yeah. And we were talking before this that, I mostly do landscape and nature, occasional wildlife. So it's really fun for me when I get to talk to people who are completely outside of my wheelhouse because I always find that I learned something that I hadn't even considered before. So really excited about that.
So true. So true. And it's funny. I had mentioned this before, like whenever I look at landscape photos, and maybe it's a sickness, but all I think about is like, I'd like to put the human there. It's like the one behind you, that gorgeous, and you got that leading line on the bottom. Like I want the human right there, smack in the middle of the frame to totally mess up that composition.
Or help it.
Or help it. Break the rule on purpose type thing. That's what I will go for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wow, you already answered one of my questions, so that'll be funny later on.
Nice.
Well, so for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. To tell everyone, to break down the wall here, Matt was like, okay, so people really want to know how old you are. Do you have kids? So let's just start, because Vanessa Joy age is actually one of my most highest Googled keywords. Is Vanessa Joy age. Isn't that nice? So I'm 41.
If you were a man, that wouldn't be a thing.
That wouldn't be, my gosh, and neither would half the YouTube trolls I get, but that's another story.
That's a whole other thing.
I'm sure you get them. Do you get YouTube trolls in the landscape world?
Oh, of course.
Yeah? Do you have like a favorite one that comes to mind? Like a favorite comment that just lived in your head too long, rent free?
So for better or worse, I'm not like big name YouTube yet. So even though I've been doing the podcast for a long, long time, I haven't gained a ton of traction on YouTube, but I do follow a lot of other YouTubers, and I read some of the comments sometimes and I'm like, wow, you are really mean. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And people super who are, like you can tell they've probably never even taken a photograph before, but they're way more expertise in the subject.
That was my comment yesterday. I had someone, and the funniest thing to me, which drives me insane, is it was like a short, like a YouTube short. So it's all 30 seconds, and this person has just decided who I am after not even 30 seconds, because you could tell he didn't finish watching it by what he said. But I was shooting with a 50 millimeter 1.8, that Canon 50 millimeter 1.8, and I said something to the effect of like, oh, I want a blurry background, so I'm going to set it to 2.5. And his comment was, well, ha ha ha, you have a 1.8 lens, and then you say you want a blurry background and you set it to 2.5. Oh, you're the best photography instructor ever. And I'm like, okay. All
wow.
right, go home to you've clearly never picked up a camera.
Right, and never use the 50 millimeter lens to see that you can still achieve a blurry background at 2.5 and probably actually at
I was going to say, and a lot more, because there's a lot more that goes into a blurry background than the aperture.
Distance between the camera and the subject, for example.
Anyway,
yeah.
just that little thing.
All right,
there's
so
always something.
41.
I'm 41. I will say the YouTube trolls do not come after my 2 kids, but I am very protective of my 2 kids. They most certainly come after my husband, who does video, and he does help me with the video stuff sometimes. He did today. I can't even say sometimes because he literally just filmed me for the past hour. And I live in Austin, Texas. I used to live in Jersey, and I still photograph. I always say I'm dually located because I fly back and forth. I fly about 150 days a year for all photography things, everything from weddings to, I do a lot of corporate. So I actually do landscape stuff because I photograph for Hilton Grand Vacations, their resorts. So they fly me to their resorts, and half of what we do is photograph the resort and the surrounding landscape and get up at sunrise and shoot, sunset. And those are long days, man. But I do some landscape. And some of it does thrill me sometimes.
Well, I mean, come on. If you're getting paid to use a camera, I think that's a pretty nice day.
That's a win. That's a pretty nice day.
It's a great day, right? Yeah.
That is. I'm going to remember that from now on. Every time I'm packing my camera bag and groaning about the thought of dragging it through an airport, I'm going to think, you know what? This is a good thing.
I know. It is important to like reset your mindset sometimes. Sometimes, like you said, I'll be in the airport and they're like, okay, you got to take everything out, and you just triggered the random screening. And it's just like, dude, I have TSA pre-check. Come on, like, let's go. And then you're like, but I'm getting paid to be here, so that's kind of cool.
Yes, it is. And you know what? Yeah. I always say when I go through and I get pulled aside for the random screening, I'm always like, I wanted a light touch massage this morning. Thank you.
Right. I needed to take my shoes off. That's.
It was getting sweaty. Thanks.
That's funny.
You gotta, the TSA people too. They're just like, most of them just like hate their existence. You can tell. The one guy that's yelling at you like, laptop, shoes, liquids. Like, how many times a day does he say that? Like a lot.
I feel really
4,
bad for them. Really
4,000.
bad.
So the point is, don't give TSA people something to make their day worse, please. They're already dealing with cranky travelers.
No doubt. So what brought you to Austin?
I hate the cold, which is another reason why landscape photography is probably not at the top of my list, because you are usually somewhat cold, because at the very least it's the coldest time of the day, sunrise and sunset. I suppose midnight would be colder. But I really hated the cold. I grew up in Jersey my whole life and realized pretty early on that, you know what, it's cold or raining or cloudy 80% of the time in New Jersey. So we wanted to go somewhere sunny, and Austin Texas does not have any state income tax. So that's just an immediate 7% raise. I liked that idea. And people are just nicer here. They're so nice. They're so nice that I thought they were going to rob me the first time I experienced it. I'm like, why are you talking to me in an elevator? What do you want to know what's in my camera bag? Like, what? No.
That's awesome.
But no, they're like, you genuinely have a full-fledged conversation with your barista at Starbucks every time. No,
people in this part of the country are pretty nice. I'm in Colorado. I'm probably, 10 hours away from Austin, but like, I feel like that part of Texas is pretty cool.
It is. So what part of Colorado? Are you like Boulder,
I'm in the
Denver?
southwest corner, so I'm in a little town called Durango.
Fun. So do you know all about your barista's life?
I'm one of those weird people that actually makes all of my own coffee at home, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I make most of my coffee at home, but on the road, you gotta have the conversation with the barista.
Yeah.
It's not just a, hey, how you doing? I'll have a flat white. It's, hi, how are you doing? Oh, hi, how are you doing? Well, you know what? It's a little cold today. But you know what? I feel like maybe you'll have to tell me about for landscape photographers, but for portrait photographers, the art of small talk and making people feel comfortable with you and in front of your camera is something that has to be practiced. So I'm almost grateful that I live in that environment where I'm constantly speaking to strangers more than I normally would, because it's really good practice for people who are in front of my camera.
Yeah, I think what you'll find is that 90% of landscape photographers are the opposite. They want to be as far away from people as they possibly can.
Oh, so do portrait photographers.
But they also don't want to talk to anybody.
No, neither do we. I'm an introvert. I don't want to talk to anybody.
See,
my husband and I will go out to dinner and literally not speak to each other and think it's a great time.
See, I'm like the opposite. I'm an extrovert, so like I love talking to strangers and learning about people and stuff like that. So, but I'm kind of a little strange for nature photographers. So.
Yeah, you're an anomaly. I think most photographers got in front of the camera because they like to observe, not interact, right?
Right.
And that's so much of what photography is. But the second you start photographing humans, for the most part, now you have to interact. Or I suppose you could be a pure street photojournalist and not have to, but very rarely.
Landscape,
right. No, I mean with people, very rarely can you not interact.
Right. Until you decide you want to teach workshops or sell prints and actually have to interact with people at an art fair or something like that.
Do you do that?
I don't do that, but I've seen a lot of art fairs in person, and you can tell who's good at it and who's not.
That's an art in itself, I suppose, right? Selling the photography work.
Yep. Well, let's talk about you. Let's talk about your photography journey. How did that all get spun up?
It was quite the spinning up. It really started, and I've only recently realized that it started this way, but my whole photography journey started because I failed at something I really wanted. I was homeschooled my whole life, and I really wanted to go to high school. And the only way my parents were allowing me to go to high school at that time is if I got into this vocational high school that was called High Tech High School, and it was more math oriented than anything else. And I had to take a test. And I'm very good at math. I think most photographers tend to be, or at least did, if you started out back when my ancient self did with film and everything.
Right.
So I took this test and I failed it. I didn't get in. And I remember like being so upset and so devastated that I did not get in to this high school. Thankfully, my parents let me go to school my sophomore year, the year later, instead of my freshman year. And I just went to a public school where we actually had, I believe, moved. We even moved towns during that time, counties even. So I ended up going to this public high school and took photography there. And that photography instructor ended up loving him. And I had gone back because their mat cutter was awesome. And I'd gone to college and was taking photography there. I have 5 college degrees. It's like a whole thing. But I had to cut a mat for my photo. And the mat cutter at this college just was god awful. Like I couldn't cut a straight line to save my life. So I go back to the high school, like Dunkachino in hand, because I knew he liked Dunkachino. I was like, can I use your mat cutter? And I learned that he did weddings on the weekends, and I would come in with my work that I was cutting the mats for, and he would see my work, and he's like, you know what, do you want to come work with me? Do you want to come assist? Do you want to come maybe second shoot a wedding? And I did, and I worked for him for 5 years, aside from the fact that I fell in love with photography in the darkroom there while he taught me, and it spun from there. I mean, I did go get a real job because I thought I had to have a real job. That was back before Instagram or even like websites. Like I had to convince this man to get a website. That's how long ago it was. Like he was convinced that no, Yellow Pages is the way to go. And that's the only way to go for advertising.
Right, right.
So I didn't have any other examples other than him. And, you know, his real job was a photography teacher. And my mom was a photographer also, but her real job was, you know, taking care of kids and homeschooling them. So I had to get a real job, and I became a Spanish teacher and started my own photography business that same year. Again, 5 years after working for this guy. And 3 years in, I got to quit my day job and live the dream. And that was 13 years ago now.
And obviously there's a lot of things probably in between there that we'll talk about later, but
Yeah.
that's amazing. It's funny you mentioned that you had to get a real job, because I find that in landscape photography, I think for the most part, people are like really hardcore enthusiasts or hobbyists.
Right. And they all have real jobs.
Yeah, most people start out that way. And then, you know, a bunch of people they know tell them like, oh, your photographs are really cool. They're amazing. Like you should do more of that. And then it turns into this like 10-year process of trying to figure out how to make it full time.
Are there a lot of doctors and dentists in your world?
There is actually, right? Yeah.
That's a niche.
There are a lot of doctors and dentists and I would say lawyers that pick up the camera. You know, I think a lot of it. Yeah, definitely engineers.
I know a few engineers.
Because, you know, it's like very technical, and I find that part of photography super easy.
They understand inverse square law really well.
Yeah, right. Like exposure triangle, that's nothing.
Yeah.
But composition, on the other hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do find a lot of that. It's been interesting, though, because I've been doing photography for about 15 years. And so along that time, I've definitely seen the path to becoming a full-time landscape photographer shift a bit, especially with Instagram and all that stuff. I'm not necessarily convinced it's easier, but it seems like
it's harder.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, right.
The art, well, not the art, but the process of taking photos, I think is easier.
Yes.
Right? Like we don't have to worry as much about autofocus, or we don't have to worry about the chemicals going bad and just completely ruining your photos. I think the process of taking photos is much easier, but the process of getting paid to take photos is more difficult, and getting yourself out there is much more difficult. It can be really disheartening, in fact.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I don't know. It's been interesting for me because I'm a psychology. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology. That was my career for forever.
I only have an associate's in psychology.
But so the only reason I bring that up is because I like to study behavior, right? And I like to understand human behavior. And what I found in the landscape space is that a lot of the people, and again, I'm painting with a big brush here, but it seemed like to me a lot of the people who were finding ways to kind of make it full-time had to do some really weird, questionable behavior type stuff to get there. Like,
what?
You know, like be really sleazy, salesy person,
like grimy sales.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Or there's people who like have this super, super, super aggressive marketing style, and they're constantly in your face and they're constantly bragging, and you know, like none of it felt good to me. Like, and so I was like, well, if I don't want to do that, how am I going to find my way of making it in this space? So I'd be curious to hear kind of what your journey and like finding your place in the photography business. What did that look like for you?
Well, so I only knew that side of it, right? I only knew wedding and portraits because those were my examples. So that's all I knew. And when I really am very fortunate that I worked for this man for 5 years, because I saw the whole process. And I think that's something a lot of photographers lack when they go into business. They're like, okay, let me just sell my services. And then they don't know how to sell maybe their product, or maybe they don't want to sell their product. And then you start looking, and a lot of what's out there that is good at sales, or companies that are good at sales, are usually the ones that are volume and kind of sleazy. So that's like what you see the most of. I will say in the wedding world, it's not as much. But regardless, I ended up seeing the process in its entirety. And I saw the way that we would go to bridal shows, or the way that we would advertise, the way that we would promise what we do and then deliver what we do. So I think I was very fortunate, and I worked for someone who was very ethical and did a really good job at setting expectations and then fulfilling or exceeding them. But as I expanded and wanted to sell more, or wanted to market myself more, I've definitely made mistakes. I've definitely felt, looking back, that some of the things were, I wouldn't say sleazy, but cheesy. would be a better word.
Yeah.
Like
sure.
we would do photo contests, for example, on social media. And everybody that I photographed that previous year, I would pick my favorite photo of theirs, throw it up on social, and then basically whichever one got the most likes, they would win a 16 by 20. And all it was garnering exposure. And looking back, like it's so cheesy, but also that's what everyone did at the time.
Yeah.
One thing that I did that I think was not, it wasn't sleazy because it was open and honest of what was happening, but it didn't feel good to me, is when I moved to Austin, I was just doing everything to get business in my new space. And I did some Instagram ads that were a free engagement session, and you would get an 8x10 with that engagement session. And then you would try to sell them other things, digital photos, albums, bigger wall pieces, whatever it was. And then hopefully have them book you for the wedding. Now, did it succeed? Sort of. I mean, I ended up booking 3 sessions off of it. One of them booked me for their wedding. But that process to me was like, I just don't like it, right? And it wasn't dishonest. They knew right away. They got pricing up front too of other things that they could buy. But I think it comes down to what doesn't feel authentic to you as the photographer. That's what's important. And I don't think it just has to do with sales. I think it has to do with how you even photograph, how much you Photoshop and how much you don't. Like, that goes into so many different facets of photography, not just marketing and sales.
I was going to say, like, we could do this for like 6 hours, like talk about all of those things.
Yes. What time is it? How long have we been here?
Yeah. You know, that's interesting. I mean, it's also probably worth mentioning that you're a Canon Explorer of Light.
I am.
I would love to hear, like, how did that happen? Like,
Oh,
I'm
man.
sure it wasn't just like you woke up one day and you got an email. Like,
No. No. I mean, yes. I roll out of bed and sign autographs all the time. No, I mean, little old me, like, I think I was 18 or 19 at the time working for a photographer. We would go to shows. So shows were a huge thing back in the day. Photo Plus. Have you ever been to Photo Plus in New York City?
I have not.
Okay. So used to be a lot bigger. It was half consumer, half professional, a lot of portrait, a lot of photojournalism. And I went to that show, and I was probably standing next to the Canon booth at the show. And I heard someone say, "Oh yeah, Dennis Reggie speaking on the Canon stage." And then there was a sign over there. It was like Dennis Reggie, Joe Busink. And someone said, "Yeah, they're Canon Explorers of Light. Dennis is a Canon Explorer of Light." And I'm like, "Oh, what's that? I want to be that." I didn't even know what it was. And I was like, I mean, Explorer of Light, is there a cooler title? I really don't think there is.
It is pretty cool sounding.
It is. It really is. And I knew, and that was 21 years ago now at this point, 22. And I just knew it was something that I wanted to achieve. And I am not a dream board person. I don't have those vision boards, but like in the back of my mind, that was a goal. And I have a pretty good work ethic. I mean, I worked myself up, and it wasn't in the back of my head the entire time, but for the last 10 years, it probably was. And I started speaking. And that's really where you get in front of companies a little bit more, or just being more prevalent on social media. And I very strategically worked relationships, and I knew this person, knew this person, knew that person that was the head of the Explorer of Light program. And I just built relationships and, kept shooting Canon. I've always shot Canon, so that was easy to show the loyalty there. And whatever moving target they had that year, or I should say 5 years, because it was about a 5-year relationship building exercise.
Wow, yeah.
I hit it. And it was 2020, January of 2020, when I first became an Explorer of Light. So it's been almost 5 years. It's been a minute.
A lot of speaking engagements, a lot of helping them provide value to their customers.
Mm-hmm. Education is big.
Yeah, so like if someone was like, and it doesn't have to be Canon, right? It could be Sony or Nikon or Fuji, whatever. But like if someone wanted that type of relationship with a camera brand, what kind of strategic thinking would they have to go through in terms of like figuring that path out?
The biggest thing to think about, and probably the most difficult, is that becoming or creating that kind of relationship with a company, you have to understand that relationship is a marketing relationship. That is not you are the best photographer in the world and here's your reward. Here's your trophy for how awesome you are. That's not what it is. It's almost always housed in the marketing department, and their goal with it is like any other marketing goal. It's to create brand awareness, it's to create buyers. So you have to be in a position where you are fulfilling some kind of marketing goal for them. Sometimes it's just brand awareness in a community where they are not as active in. Sometimes it's a demographic. So it's kind of research. You have to research, what do they need? At the time when I became a Canon Explorer of Light, they really needed somewhat younger people to be in there. They definitely needed more women. I think I'm still only one of the 5 wedding photographers that are an Explorer of Light, and they needed someone that was more prevalent on social media. So I checked a lot of boxes for them that way. So you have to figure out what their boxes are and find out ways where you fit naturally to fit them, and then other ways that you can work more.
And obviously that was a lot of work to get into that position. How have you been able and to keep it, I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. How have you been able to leverage that for your business? For
my business and clients hiring me, I mean, I have it on my website. They don't carry as much weight like as a photographer would be like, oh, that's a thing.
Right.
Yeah. But I do say things sometimes like, oh, your wedding is, I don't know, a year and a half from now. I don't know what camera I'll be using, but I do know it will likely be cameras that no one else can get because of my relationship with Canon. Or I'll say something along those lines. Like, it'll just be the newest and best there is because I always get first dibs on the newest and best there is.
There you go.
So that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's say you're a landscape photographer and you were just starting out today.
Yes.
What would be the first 3 things that you would do in order to establish yourself and create your business?
Ooh, it's the same. It does not matter whether you are a landscape portrait photographer. It does not matter if you are selling concrete or anything else, because marketing is like math. It's the same in every language. So it's always the same. One, you have to find out where your audience is, right? What is the type of person? Who is the avatar? What does that avatar look like for the person that you are trying to get in front of? Where do they shop? How do they spend their time? Where do they spend their time? What things are important to them? Because ultimately, marketing is just learning to be where your people are and learning to speak their language. So you have to figure that out. Just determine that avatar. And this is just not the sexy side of photography at all. I know everybody here wishes I just said, well, it's to take pretty pictures and get them out there. Yeah, but it's just not. So find your avatar. So that's first. And then obviously go where they are and speak their language and be present at the things that they're present at. So whatever that is. The second thing is you do have to be present on social media. I really do think so. Now, there are some people that can be purists and do really well without it. And I don't just applaud them, I envy them. But most of the time you do have to get yourself out there on social media, and then maybe work both paid and organic advertisements. But then the last thing you have to do, you got to find your people. You got to find your community of photographers. And they might not be landscape photographers. They might not be your genre, but just other people that you can grow with, that you can vent to your frustrations and ask questions when you need to ask questions. So those are probably the 3 main things that I would do if you're just starting out. And again, I don't care if you're selling concrete or phone books. It's all the same. I don't know where your audience is for selling phone books, though. That's for sure.
Well, they're free, right? So, but
yeah.
No, I'm glad you said
someone will buy it. We all buy bottled water.
I'm glad you brought up Avatar, because I did a webinar with David Johnston about selling prints on your website. And one of the things I taught in there was like creating a ideal customer avatar and like listing out, like you said, like where do those people shop? What are they looking for? How much money they make? What problems do they have? How can you help them solve those problems? So it's a lot of it's like you said, is like understanding who your customer is, and then you start tailoring your marketing based on who that audience is. With that being said,
now some people say that that's sleazy. I have arguments with friends of mine about this.
I don't think so.
That marketing in general, marketing is manipulation because you are tailoring the way that you speak in order to manipulate them to buy. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on how you present it and how honest you are in the process. You know, like I've seen some people selling things. Okay, for example, in landscape photography, there's a lot of, and I'm going to probably get some hate mail for this, but it's something I strongly believe
send
in.
them my way. I'll answer your hate mail from you. I'm good at it.
But when it comes to selling prints, there's this huge movement in landscape photography to do limited editions.
Okay.
And like do certificates of authentication and like all of these things that like make the print seem like it's this super fine piece of art that's came from a museum from like 1842 or whatever. And like for me, like that's all marketing. Those are just tactics to get the buyer to, in their mind, elevate that photograph.
Urgency. Scarcity, rather. Yeah.
It creates, but it's false scarcity, right? Like photographs can be reproduced infinite number of times. I think the only time you can make a use case or a case for that is if like you're printing on different materials every time, or every photograph is slightly unique,
or you flat out refuse to print more than 20 or whatever it is.
Sure, you could do that, but again, it's like artificial that you're.
Yeah.
To me, it's all stuff that was created by art galleries in order to generate more sales, and to me, I mean, it's. I don't know. That's just an example from in my mind when I see, we only do 1 of 20, and that's why it's like $10,000. Like to me, that's just like trying to convince someone that it's worth a lot of money. Yeah,
it's creating value, but is the value like there? If they stick to that, like I think of Thomas Kincaid's. My parents went on like a cruise and they got a Thomas Kincaid. Right? Is Thomas Kincaid?
I think so, yeah.
Not photographer, painter. And I just know, like, I saw, like, the signature on it. And it's not the original painting. It's a print, essentially. But his signature is there, and it says, like, I don't know, 26 of 300. Is that more valuable because he's not printing anymore? And, of course, it's a well-known name.
Yeah, I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole of...
I can see both sides, for sure.
The reality is, though, like, I sell a decent number of prints, and I think... out of the 500 or 600 people I've sold prints to, I've only had one ask me, do you do limited editions? Like it's something we push on people to get them to think it's worth more.
Right.
Anyway, that's just one example that comes to my mind about something that people do that feels a little bit kind of disingenuous or like, you know.
Or when something's always on sale, which I have to say, my website, you definitely see that. Things are always on sale. Like I mean, that's original price or value price, but what I'm pricing it at.
Right. I mean, that's a tactic that you see that in a lot of Instagram ads and stuff like that. Like normally this is $200, but today it's $300. You know,
I've seen ones that are way more dramatic than that, like $40,000 value now for $99.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of like, is marketing all disingenuous or manipulative? I don't think it all is. I mean, I think best case scenario, you're able to target the people who are looking for what you have to offer, and you're showing them how what you have to offer solves a problem that they have. I mean, a simple example is like yesterday, I was on Instagram and I got an ad for like this cat toy, and I have 4 cats, and my cats are bored, and like this thing was jumping all over the room, and I'm like, my cats need that. So I bought it, you know? So like,
nice.
Solves a problem. It's simple. Like to me, marketing doesn't have to be any more complicated than solving somebody's problem.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. Solving someone's problem. I do have to say, I've been around more landscape or hobbyist photographers lately since I started doing photo trips. I do these international photo trips. And there is a certain piece that the photographers who are landscape or hobbyist photographers not trying to market themselves like crazy, essentially just not having that marketing piece we're talking about. There's a level of peace that they have about them that those of us that are stressing out about marketing and, you know, putting food on our table with photography, that we just don't have. And I definitely am a little jealous of it.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I get people ask me a lot of times like, what should I do to become full-time? And I'm like, unless you're willing to sacrifice everything except for your friends and your family, don't do it.
Yeah, because it takes a lot.
And it potentially will completely ruin what you fell in love with to begin with. And for a lot of people, especially in landscape and nature, it's an escape from reality. It's
Right.
their way of getting away from all of the stressful things in their life. So why would you want to make that also how you have to put food on the table?
Well, I think most people want just to not have the day job, right? The day job is like, you know
Right.
what, it's drudgery. I don't really like it. But, why can't I just be a photographer and do this all the time? The problem is the second you become a full-time photographer, you realize your full-time job is not picking up a camera. It's so
Right,
many
exactly.
more things. You actually probably pick up a camera more as a hobbyist than you do as a professional photographer.
100% all day long. So maybe the flip side, for people who aren't looking to monetize their photography, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about what other goals we can set for ourselves outside of financial ones.
I think recognizing, for me, this has been a big one, and I'll tell you the backstory of what I experienced last year. Or was it this year? Anyway, the ability to recognize when you are content, I think, is something that I know I was lacking, and a lot of people that I know are lacking. Because that should be the biggest indicator of success as a photographer, right? Is seeing ourselves in that place of success and enjoying it. So I'm in the wedding field, in the wedding world specifically. There's just such an upper echelon. It's not like the 1%. It's the 1% of the 1% of weddings that people are spending multiple millions of dollars on weddings. And when you go on Instagram, it's really easy to be like, wow, why am I not photographing a wedding that has $6 million worth of orchids bathing everything, right?
Right,
And
where they rented a private island and a mansion,
Yeah.
and you have to
Totally
fly there,
normal.
and
Yeah.
totally.
Totally normal. But I started seeing so much of it. And honestly, I got to the point mentally where I was like, I cannot take this anymore. And I unfollowed on Instagram every single photographer, including my closest friends. Some of them who called me are like, are we friends? You unfollowed me. But I had to just for my sanity do that. And then I was like, you know what? I'm seeing all this. Why can't I achieve that? Why can't I photograph those weddings? And I hired a couple different people. I hired a content specialist, a branding specialist, to look at my photos, tell me which photos I needed to show. That was kind of okay. But then I hired someone else that worked with a luxury planner, and she just did consulting. And I'm talking to her. I'm getting ready for this. I'm mentally prepared for her to be like, you suck and you will never be where you should be. And I'm telling her that, you know what? I do have clients that are paying my price, and my price is definitely in the 1% of wedding photographers out there. So I'm telling her, I have people that pay my price. I have amazing clients that I actually love, and I love photographing them. But most of the time, the weddings, when I show up, they're just not that quality wedding, or they have that budget sometimes, but they have no sense, not no sense, I don't want to be mean, but they don't have that Vogue sense of style that's going to get published in Vogue or published in Elle or People magazine or whatever, or it's not celebrities. And I'm complaining to her like an entitled little girl about how they all spend my money and I'm really, really successful, but it's not this level. And they're all really happy with me and happy with them. And she looks at me, she's like, Vanessa, why are you not satisfied with this? You just finished telling me you're making the money you want to make and you love the clients that you get. Who cares if you're photographing someone to be in People magazine? Learn that, understand that where you are is where most people want to be, in a place where their clients are happy, that they relate to their clients, they enjoy working and being there, and they're getting paid for it. And I was kind of picked my jaw up off the floor, okay, I'm going to go crawl into my corner now and learn that contentment needs to come from some other places, or at least I need to stop comparing myself to what I see on Instagram. And that was definitely something for me, at least, that was a measure of success, where I had to actually remind myself that success is not every high thing I see, or being the most expensive or the most booked or any of it. I just have to learn to define what success actually is and then understand it when it smacks me in the face. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that comparison piece can really be the thief of joy. You know,
It so is.
and
It really is.
I actually had to do the same thing. There's several well-known photographers in the landscape space that constantly are bragging about either the next place they're going to or how much money they're making in sales or all of these things, and you're just like,
isn't that embarrassing?
And I don't want to. I'm like, I don't want to see that. That's not good for my mental health. So I just started unfollowing those people. Like, if you're here to just brag about how amazing you are, like, that's not why I'm here. So yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the comparison piece for people who aren't looking to monetize, because what I find is that, or I guess you said contentment, but I think there can be a healthy balance.
Mm-hmm.
Because I find when I get content in my photography, I stop trying to do new things or experiment or push the boundaries a little bit. And so for me, it's like trying to walk that line of being really happy with where I'm at, but also giving myself enough room to grow and experiment and try new things and push the boundaries a little bit. Yeah, complacency. So, I mean, it's like contentment and complacency, like there's a balancing act there, I think.
There is, and I think it changes as you grow as a photographer too. You know, there are seasons of complacency in a way where you're just meant to be where you are, and maybe that's where you start helping other people versus always trying to push you. When I first started teaching, that was one of the things that helped get me out of burnout. I mean, I'm sure you experienced burnout in landscape photography. I think any creative,
of course,
any creative does. But me learning or helping people learn photography pushes me past burnout, because I could almost piggyback on their excitement, piggyback on their thriving, their pushing forward and leveling up their businesses. I teach a lot on the business side of photography, and that's been something that's really exciting for me, just watching people push forward, and it gets me out of that complacency mindset.
Yeah, it's I love that you said that about teaching, because that's one of the things that I love about teaching as well. Is it's a confidence booster too, right? Like, it's like, oh wow, I actually do know some things that I can help people, and so it makes you feel good. It's like, yeah, I actually deserve to be here, and this is cool.
I get imposter syndrome. Actually, I get the opposite. I actually, all those YouTube trolls we were talking about before, I'm like, wait, are they right? Am I the worst instructor ever? Do I not know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I get the opposite.
Imposter syndrome is a tough one, because I think at some point everyone feels it. I can remember the first time I felt it really bad. I got invited to be an instructor at a landscape photography conference in Yosemite called Out of Yosemite. It was a pretty big deal because I was surrounded by like some of my favorite photographers, like the best photographers in the world in landscape were also there as instructors.
That's so cool.
And so we're like, the first day they call us up to have everyone introduce themselves, and I'm just looking around and I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm not supposed to be here.
But that's a full circle moment, right? You do deserve to be there, but it's really easy to not feel like you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, we have so many cool things we can talk about. One of the things I was really excited to talk to you about was Instagram, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on Instagram ads versus organic growth on the platform, because I know that, I mean, I'm on Threads, and like every time you open Threads, you see people complaining about like, I can't grow, everything. I can't grow. Well, yeah, complaining about everything, but
Threads is so toxic.
It can be. For sure. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on organic versus paid ads.
I hate to say it, and I have something to give everybody here that will quell what I'm about to say in a minute, but I hate to say it, you do have to pay in a lot of ways on social media, whether it's Instagram or YouTube. And I'm not saying paying for likes. There's a right way and a wrong way to do advertising. For example, think about making a TV commercial, right? And you have that TV commercial, and it's for, I don't know, your avatar or senior citizens, right? When is a commercial going to air? It's going to air in the middle of the day, right? So that would be the right way to advertise that commercial versus the wrong way, which would basically be buying views or buying likes that are completely irrelevant, would be to air that at midnight because all the older people are likely sleeping, right? It's the same thing when it comes to social media. So organic growth, awesome. Best kind of growth you can have, right? Organic. It's a warm audience, or it's an audience that naturally found you or was referred to you, which is the best kind of marketing anyone can ask for. That's, of course, what we all want, what we strive for. And ideally, when you're creating content, you're hoping that it grows organically. And there are things you can do to make that happen or help that happen. But besides that, there's also an audience that maybe you would never reach organically, and it is a cold audience, and a way to reach them is with ads. I don't do a ton of ads, to be honest. I do when it comes to my photography itself, like my hoping somebody buys something from me, a photography service or whatever. I don't do a ton. What I do is I will post like I typically post, and if something does really well organically, then I'll boost that post and I'll throw a couple $100 behind it to the demographic of my typical client. It's that simple, and it's, $20, $50. If I'm feeling a lot, then maybe $100. Same thing for like YouTube. If a YouTube video is doing really well, they have a little promote button on the back, and I'll throw like an extra $100 at it, $200 at it. Not a lot, but it's just to get your content in front of an audience that never would have found you anyway. And as long as it's the right audience, at, like you were saying, you're solving a problem for them. So you're selling cat stuff to the people who own cats. Like, great. That's wonderful. That was worth it. But the way to not do it is like, let me just buy some likes, or let me advertise to people that don't speak the language that the video is in. Now, if you can translate your video into different languages, that's a different story. But right. If you're just doing that, that's horrible. And that will actually end up hurting your growth overall. There's a lot of things that so many photographers do, business owners, photographers, that kill their Instagram algorithm like crazy, and they don't even know they're doing it.
For example,
in your post, whether it's a reel, whether it's a post, and you say link in bio, you might as well just never have posted.
Right.
Never, just don't even post. Because what happens? You are indicating to Instagram that you want people to leave their platform. And how well do you think they like that? It's like going to someone else's party and saying, hey, leave this party, come over to mine. Right. The person who invited you is not going to be thrilled. And Instagram, it kills your algorithm. I do have, if you go on Instagram, I don't really advertise this anywhere. Every once in a while I'll post about it. But if you go to my Instagram and you send me a message, so at Vanessa Joy, send a message, the words Insta Tips, INSTA Insta Tips. I have a PDF that has a bunch of the different engagement boosters, and then a bunch of the different engagement killers, and then how you can work around it. Because ultimately, you're selling landscape prints. You can sell them on Instagram, but I think they take quite a big cut, and you ultimately want them to go to your website, right? So
right, yeah.
There are ways to do that and get them to your website without killing your algorithm. In fact, there are ways that'll boost it. So if you go to my Instagram, at Vanessa Joy, DM me the words Insta Tips. I can give that to you. It's free. And then I'll, pull down the fourth wall after that. I do have a whole course on it that I offer for $7. So you can grab that. But honestly, even if you just got that PDF, it's worth its weight in gold. It will transform accounts for sure.
Yeah, one of the things that I had heard, gosh, this must have been 4 or 5 years ago now, but I'm thinking it's still true, is if you can somehow get people to DM you, whether that's because they're responding to your story, so if you put something in your story like send me your best stories on this, or however you can get people to DM you, whatever that looks like. Apparently that is a huge signal to Instagram to show them your posts later. So if there's, I think that's still true.
Matt, why do you think I just told everyone to DM me?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure that's a thing. Yeah.
It's a thing. It's very much a thing. And there's ways to do it that makes it a big thing and makes it ultimately grow your list and capture your audience. Because whether it's paid ads, organic ads, your goal with all of them ultimately is to capture your audience and bring them to your space. Because Instagram could go down tomorrow. YouTube could be totally done. I mean, MySpace already is, right? So everything's going to die their social death at some point, and you're always trying to evolve. But if you capture the audience, that's the best.
So we've talked a lot about trying to find the right types of clients. And so in landscape and nature, a lot of times either looks like print buyers, but for a lot of people listening, I'm guessing it's either workshops or it's people who are looking for stories, or like, you know, you go on like a travel trip to Canada and you want to write an article for a magazine, like whatever that client looks like. So what advice do you have for building your brand in order to attract the right types of clients?
You have to find out where they are. So if you are looking to write, you know, on a trip, and I'm assuming you mean like photographic essays type thing, or at least that's one way. You know, maybe you're great at writing too, but it is so difficult to get published these days. It is difficult in the wedding world. It's difficult, I think, across the board, because there's just so much imagery, so many people. So the best ways that you can get published or getting in there is to get to know these people. So I would say your secondary avatar, aside from the people who are maybe buying your workshops or buying your prints, are editors. Where do editors go? Where do they do meetups? What conferences are they on? You know, all of those types of things have a huge part to play in networking and marketing. I'll give you an example. So I'm going to Africa in a couple of weeks, and I paid to go on a photo trip with a photographer and a bunch of other photographers. I'm going with Manny Ortiz, if you're familiar. He's a portrait YouTuber. Jared Polin, Frono's Photo, the
I know
photo guy.
Who Jared is.
Yeah, and a bunch of us. So we're all going to Africa, and I paid to go. And one of my goals from that is to make money from it, not actually pay to go. So preemptively, I'm doing things like filming myself photographing. I plan on pitching photographic essays to places like Petapixel, and you have to think of all the different possibilities. YouTube videos are a really great one. So I'm looking at that particular trip that I'm going on and paying on as more of an investment, and then I'm going to find ways to monetize it. Now, is it great to do it after the fact? Not necessarily. Before would be great, but sometimes you have to show it in order to get it picked up. But because I have relationships already with like Tenba bags, they sent me a bag that's over there, and I'm going to be able to make content with the bag that I have, that I specifically needed a new one because I'm bringing the 100 to 300, the Canon 100 to 300 2.8, and it just does not fit in my other book bag that I have. Having those relationships off the bat ahead of time, I know somebody who writes for Petapixel, so I can reach out to them and say, hey, I did this trip to Africa and I think it would be a cool article. You know, let me know. And I may or may not get paid for that one. It just might be brand recognition. That's another thing to think about. Sometimes you don't get paid for it, and I hate to say exposure, but sometimes the exposure does turn into people who buy things. So there's lots of different avenues that you can look to monetize.
Yeah, I need to leverage that more often. I've written some articles for Petapixel in the past, and I think it's always a good idea to try to do that. I just, for whatever reason, I don't think that far ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. It's maintaining those relationships too, which can just be extremely difficult to do. It's time consuming, and it's not in front of you all the time either. Right.
For whatever reason, my really good monetization ideas come after I create something. So I'm like I created this video and this article that Petapixel picked up that was all about evaluating different print labs across the country for getting your photos printed, and it was a lot of work, crazy amount of work. But like, I don't get anything for it. It's not like I have people sending me money to evaluate their products or anything like that. It's just I just thought it would be a cool idea because people ask me all the time, like, which lab do you use? Why do you use it? Like, I just need to create something I can just send people later.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did that. And then later after the fact, I was like, man, wouldn't have that been smart if I would have like created an affiliate relationship with all these labs? And, you know what I mean? That would have been a really good idea, which I didn't. But like, so sometimes like those kind of ideas come after you have the experience and create whatever you're creating. But ideally, in my mind, you have to get out there and you have to create something in order for those ideas to start come to you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, you learn from it. There are plenty of things you look back on, like coulda, woulda, shoulda. But if it stings enough, you'll remember next time.
Exactly.
Sometimes it needs to sting just a little.
Yep. No, that resonates with me. All right. Well, I'd be curious to hear about your advice for balancing career and family without sacrificing creativity or burning out.
I can't honestly give you like a great answer to that question because I feel like I fail consistently at that. So I'm really consistent at not having a good work-life balance. But I think the awareness of the pendulum is important, right? We have a pendulum. Work is here, life is on the other side, and our balance of it is always swinging. It's always swinging. And I think just being aware, like, you know what, right now I am noticing it's really swinging the other way. What can I do to try to bring it close to center? Understanding that at no point will it stay in center and live there. That's what I think. I do have a really cool toolkit that I just put together. And again, you have to DM me for it. This is good practice for everybody. It is a digital toolkit that helps me. It's a combination of all the like digital little tips and tricks that help me maintain balance. Everything from where I get a virtual assistant to how I automatically respond to all of you on Instagram. I mean, I even put in there, and I probably shouldn't, I even put in there like the one thing that I do, like a supplement that I take that helps me focus. Oh. I don't know. It's not pharmaceutical, but I always just feel weird telling people like a supplement. But if you message me the words joy tools, so joy like Vanessa Joy, Joy, joy tools, TOOLS, joy tools, I can give you that worksheet. I think finding the tech to help you to balance your life is absolutely crucial. And there's so much of it available right now. So you can have my curated list of things that I have found helpful, both home and work. But ultimately, just be aware of that pendulum. It's always swinging one way or the other. Just notice where it is. And if some adjustments need to be made, make them.
I think that's the hard part for me is like recognizing when the pendulum is too far in one direction or the other. And I've come up with, there's been a few like indicators of that for me. Like, for example, if I'm not excited to edit photographs that I've recently taken, to me, that's like a clear indicator that I need to like get out of that work mode. Like I need to go have fun and come back and revisit the photographs later. And then opposite of that, if like all I want to do is like play video games or something, like maybe like you should probably do some projects before you go do that. So like for me, I've like had to like pick up on some of those cues where I can fall into these dangerous habits of getting way too hardcore into work or way too hardcore into play.
Yeah. Or sometimes those cues where you need to go play video games, maybe that's a cue that you are working too hard. That's what happens to me where I work by default. I'm always going to work, but then my body's like, man, I really need to take a nap like every day. Like, okay, this might be an indicator that I really need to pull it back a little bit before I get sick.
So for these DM things that you've set up on Instagram, are those just automations that you've set up through the Instagram business messaging thing?
No. So I don't use the Instagram business one because it's very limited. If you DM me the words Auto Baby, AUTOBABY, Auto Baby, I will give you, because there is an affiliate link, and yes, I do make money on it. So please do that. I'll tell you the company in a minute, but if you can't use my link, that's awesome. But it's a company called ManyChat, and ManyChat it's becoming more well known because I think they're the best at what they do right now. But ManyChat, not only does it do those auto DMs and triggers, it will let you follow up also. Like say I follow up in an hour. Hey, did you get into the thing I sent you? Okay. Or I'll follow up in 24 hours and, hey, I have more freebies to give you. Do you mind giving me your email address? And then it'll automatically add their email address to my ConvertKit is what I use for that. So it has just a lot more capability versus the Instagram one. And there is a somewhat free version, I feel like up to like a certain number of messages. So it's pretty good, just more intuitive than the Instagram one. And it's totally fine because Instagram has open API. So you're good. You won't get booted for using it or anything like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I've only dabbled in the Instagram messaging, and I was like, I don't think it can do what she's describing. So how's she doing that?
No,
Cool.
It's a little bit better.
All right. Well, I'd be curious. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the ways that you've successfully scaled your business. Like, because that's something that I think everyone struggles with at some point. I mean, it's a good problem to have, but like when you get there, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do.
I think as creatives, the first thing we have to realize is we can't do it all on our own. And there's a lot of control that has to be let go with that. But when you let go of that control and you have that help, it gives you more time to be creative. And then you can hold a camera more than you hold a mouse. So unless you want to, of course, some people really love editing. I am on your side of the fence where I'm like, the second I take the photo, I'm like, and we're good. I don't want to edit it anymore. But understanding that you can't do it all on your own and then finding how to get that help. Whether you're using a program like Imagine AI to AI edit some of your stuff. You don't do as much batch processing as I do, so that might not be a landscape solution, but same kind of concept, something where you can digitally outsource, or maybe you're going to really outsource, like you hire a virtual assistant. Maybe they work 10 hours a week. Mine works 40 or 45. So just understand that you can't do it all on your own because, man, photographers are a weird bunch. Us creatives, we're such purists in so many ways that we just feel we have to do it all on our own. Like, how dare we have someone else edit our photo or have someone else post on Instagram for us? Like, that's okay. You know who else doesn't post on Instagram himself? Probably Mark Zuckerberg. He probably has a team. I don't know that. That might not be a fact.
For other people to post on Instagram for me. It takes up way too much of my time.
Absolutely. What do you spend your time doing? Like what sucks up your day that's not holding a camera?
Well, the big one for me is editing podcasts, unfortunately. And I've looked
even with the AI editors?
Yeah, I mean, because I also do video, so like, it's AI can't like
they
do
have
what
them.
Yeah, but like the way I
don't
do
know if
it
they
is
suck.
No, so the system I'm using right now, Riverside, they have some AI that'll do like it'll spit out a video, and I use that as like a starting point.
Okay.
And then I pull that into Descript, and then in Descript I do even more stuff, and then I also add transitions and like add photos and like other videos and things like that. So like I can't do that stuff, and like it would never know how like. And so I've looked into like outsourcing that work, but it's like basically would cost any profits I make on doing the podcast. So it's like,
yep. Well, then you're not ready to outsource that yet, right?
Right.
Because
correct.
you have to be ready emotionally and you have to be ready financially to do it.
I'm ready emotionally.
Now we just have to let's analyze you, Matt. How can we get your podcast? Because I assume podcast profits come from sponsors mostly.
That's the traditional way of going about it. But that typically really only works if you have like a massive audience.
You still have a relevant audience though, right? Massive.
It's very niche.
Yeah. But that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. But I have not really been able to successfully leverage that niche for some reason. I also probably haven't put nearly as much effort into that side of things, but yeah, so for the most part...
I can see labs wanting to get spots.
That would be nice. Yeah. There you go. I mean, I could probably make a whole list of the places I should target and then actually spend the time to do that. But then it would be like, then I can't do my own photography. So it's
true. And back to the beginning.
We've come full circle.
Yes, full circle. All the things you do except for hold the camera.
Exactly. All right. Well, I know earlier you had talked a lot about photo education. Tell us about Photo Insiders.
Oh, Photo Insiders is fun. I do have to say, I don't know that it applies to your audience specifically, but because most of what's inside Photo Insiders, which is a subscription education platform that I am on, most of it is photographing humans. So there's everything from posing, individuals, couples, groups, lighting, natural light, off-camera flash, on-camera flash, continuous lighting. And we also have our own community that is, for the love of God, not on Facebook. It is separate. You get your own app for it. And, it's direct access to me, which is really nice. There's not a ton of us in there. There's a couple hundred of us in Photo Insiders. So if anybody has questions, you get really great people in there. I'm so fortunate just to have kind, genuine people in Photo Insiders that if someone asks a question in the group, then they will get good answers. And then, of course, I'll chime in as well. But I also do group calls with everybody every month. So we have a live component, and we've done everything from just edit and hang out to group coaching calls to somebody sits in the hot seat and, we photo critique or critique their website or Instagram. And it's a lot of fun. I love Photo Insiders, but a lot of it is photographing humans. So your crowd might like the photo trip that I'm hosting in Bali next year. So I did Italy last year, we did Croatia this year, and then next year we're going to Bali. And I do have a model with us, so she comes with us, and she's just absolutely stunning. But it's obviously a landscape photography dream and cultural photography. It's going to be a lot of fun, but that is in July 2025. And right now there's only 4 spots left. So we're close to selling those out. And you might guess how you find out more about that trip.
I'm going to guess.
Me. You DM me the words photo trip. Photo. I think we all know how to spell photo. I'm not going to spell that out for anyone. Photo trip, TRIP.
That's genius. So one thing I've come to realize is that I think out there might be this stigma that landscape photographers only do landscape photography or whatever. But what I found is that I won't say most. I would say maybe half of the people that I know that do landscape photography full time, they're also doing weddings. They're also doing portraits. They're also doing senior headshots and senior photo shoots, and they're also doing events. And I think that's kind of the reality of where we're at in photography right now, is that in order to, depending on the market and depending on how well you've done for yourself, most people have to find multiple streams of income,
multiple genres,
multiple ways of bringing in money. And obviously providing services is often one of the best ways to do that, because it's tangible and it's a much more tangible problem to solve for a customer than here's this beautiful piece of art I created. Would you like to buy it for your house?
Right.
So
I can see that. It's
a little bit more just practical for a lot of people. So I bet for a lot of our listeners, what you just said is probably of interest. So don't sell yourself short.
It's a lot of fun because these photo trips, I was hesitant to do them at first. I mean, I love traveling, especially internationally, but the idea of a whole week of photo education, I'm like, won't people get tired? That's a lot of holding your camera. But I work with this company that puts together an itinerary that I help curate, where we do things like wine tasting and food cooking classes and, a little bit of tourism type stuff, but not overly, because I cannot stand tours. They just drive me crazy. But enough where it's no, these are photo tours. And then the fact that we have a model that travels with us the entire time is huge. So she's got, different outfits. We'll have planned shoots, and everything's optional. You can come on the planned shoot or not. And we're going to Bali, so you could get that really inexpensive massage or not. Or you can come on the cycling tour that we're doing or not. It's a lot of fun. And the group, it's like my photo family, and it's so much fun because in Italy, I was the first trip and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to Italy with like 24 strangers. That might be crazy. And it was incredible. And now we all still talk on Telegram. And we have a Telegram group for anyone who's come on the trip. And then we have separate ones for each trip that we've been on. So we all still like talk to each other. They're just my photo family. So we have 4 more openings to join the photo family. And I promise it's, as long as you're cool, as long as you're fun, you will have a fun time with this group. We're all very welcoming, very laid back, and just have a great time traveling the world with each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. The company I do workshops for, Mute Workshops, last year, we did a workshop in Paris, and Ooh. I'm not a street photographer, but I can teach photography wherever. And we also had a model, and it was really cool because we would go to like the opera house, and we would like have her get in a ballerina, and she's a dancer, and so she would do all these like amazing dance moves, and we're photographing her in this like, you know, the open window with light streaming through, and she's in, so and it's like, oh, this is cool. And then you go down to like the Eiffel Tower, and you're photographing a dancer in front of the Eiffel Tower, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think including a person in the landscape, whether it's a city or whatever, I think that opens up a lot of creative potential. So I think even landscape photographers can learn something from going through a process like that.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, our model, Juliana, she's just the sweetest thing in the world, but she is stunning. Like her eyes, I actually can't Photoshop or edit her eyes, like retouch them, because her eyes look so good. Like they look Photoshopped normally. So if I do anything to them, accidentally saturate them at all, it looks like totally fake. So she's just a joy to photograph. No pun intended. Actually, that's not true. All pun is intended when I use the word joy.
I was going to say, you've got a pretty awesome name for a wedding photographer.
Works out really well.
Right. Whereas I'm like maybe a dentist name or something. I don't know. Or a pain med doc. I don't know.
Pain med. Yeah. Definitely doctor.
Yeah.
See? Yeah, you could be in that niche, the landscape doctor photographer.
There you go. All right. Well, cool. So last question, who do you recommend for the podcast? Who are a couple of people that our listeners should learn more about or be excited to check out?
One of my favorite people on podcasts is Seth Miranda. And Seth Miranda, he works for Adorama, and he always does like their videos, like you'll see him on YouTube or live on Instagram. But what's interesting about Seth, which I think your audience would really enjoy, he shoots mostly special effects photography. But the way that he speaks about light applies to anything. I learned more about photographing brides listening to him talk about how to photograph fake aliens. I think I've learned anywhere else. So that's probably a good one. His friend, my friend too, but the two that we're seeing together a lot, Daniel Norton is another good one. I don't have a good like landscape photographer.
That's all right.
But David Bergman, I'm thinking of my whole Adorama family right now. David Bergman is a concert photographer. He's another Canon Explorer of Light. But he is he's a really cool person. And then Loretta Houston out of LA is a fashion photographer, also Canon Explorer of Light. That is great to talk to and just have on a podcast. And if you really want to like scare your audience, you can just have Roberto Valenzuela on. He's a Canon Explorer of Light, but he just says whatever comes to mind.
Oh, well, we like that sometimes too.
Yeah. He has 2 kids though, so he can control the cursing, no problem.
Okay. Well, Vanessa, this has been incredible. I learned a lot, and now I'm gonna go send you a bunch of Instagram DMs and see what kind of stuff comes back.
See what pops back.
That's right. I might just start typing random things to see what happens. You
could just random photography phrases. I'm sure I've got a trigger in there somewhere.
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you to Vanessa for joining me on the podcast this week and for providing all of your wonderful wisdom to us. I took a peek at her tools that she mentioned in the episode, and they're legit. You really should send her some DMs and start kickstarting your photography career. You won't regret it at all. Also, as a thanks to our listeners, please feel free to download my latest free 95-page ebook, all about composition and creativity, featuring my latest fall photography. I'll put a link in the show notes for you to grab that. It has some fun information about color theory, different compositional hacks that I lean into, and features a ton of my new work. Okay, thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.